I'm continuing the course, Overcoming the Darkness, a Christian Response to Cults, Heresies, False Religions, and the Occult. And I'm finishing up part 4, Minor Cults and False Religions. And now I'm going to deal with the Western influence cults which came into being. These being, in particular, Christian Science, Unity, Unitarianism, Universalism, which is one, and Scientology, which has, of course, been made famous by Tom Cruise. Now, Christian Science was started by Mary Baker Eddy, who was healed herself, and she wrote a book about her healing experience that really became the foundation of the Christian Science faith. But the purpose of Christian Science is the realization of God and universal goodness means to absolute health and prosperity. And in summary, they have what appear to be Christian beliefs, but in fact, they are aberrations of the Christian truth. They say God is a pantheistic entity. Jesus is a highly enlightened Christian scientist. The Christ is simply a divine manifestation of God. The Holy Spirit is really Christian Science, the organization. Salvation is awareness of one's inherent divinity, and so forth. And Mary Baker Eddy has promoted this, and it's become fairly popular in this country. They say, for example, that Jesus Christ was a great man, and that was it, and that Christ was the inherent divine aspect of every person, and that man is inherently divine, which is, of course, not true biblically. They say salvation is through knowledge, sin is basically ignorance of spiritual truths, and so forth, and death is an illusion, which I guess there are a lot of disillusioned people who are buried in the ground, and there's much more to read in the course. Now, I want to talk about unity, and the unity faith is basically one of the new thought organizations, and it's probably the largest in the United States, and they have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these churches all around the country. And the Unity School of Christianity was started by Charles and Myrtle Fillmore. And it's interesting that Myrtle was healed of tuberculosis through the application of New Thought principles, and that's how they began to develop this unity faith. Now, their creed appears to be Christian on the surface, but as you begin to look at the underlying premise, it is that the human mind has the power to create or influence reality. Not God, not the Holy Spirit, not Jesus Christ, but the human mind. And they believe that God is simply an impersonal principle. Jesus was a man who simply attained Christ's consciousness. The Trinity, interesting for them, is mind, idea, and expression. Not the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. They, again, believe that sin is erroneous thinking. That's very common in many of the 19th century cults that were created. Now, Unitarian Universalism, it's two different organizations that eventually merged around 1961. It's a theistic heresy that denies the Trinity and the absolute deity of Jesus Christ. And basically, they believe in universal salvation. Everyone will eventually be saved. And this was one of the early Gnostic heresies, which I talked about in a much earlier video of the early church. And they believe in final salvation or restoration based upon erroneous interpretations of many scriptures. And they are a very liberal denomination, very much involved in religious, political, and social affairs. And their 5 keys are freedom, justice, tolerance, reason, and pluralism. And when you begin to look at what they believe, they think the Bible was written by fallible men, so it's fallible. God is simply a person, or you can believe anything about God you want to. They reject sin. They believe man is essentially good, which is not true. They don't accept heaven and hell and so forth. And you can read more about it in the book. Lastly is Scientology, which was made famous and still made famous by Tom Cruise. And they emphasize that all human beings are inherently divine and can attain immortality through awareness of their true divine nature. It's a mixture of Eastern religions, Judaism, Gnostic beliefs, Nietzsche, a little bit from Christianity and other religions. And the Scientology teaches that all mental, emotional, and physical problems are the result of engrams. That's what they call it. These are traumatic experiences in our lives. And it's accumulated over time, and it needs to be released through Dianetics, which Ron Hubbard, who developed Scientology, promotes. And they believe God is pantheistic. Jesus is simply a man who is deified by Christian writers, that salvation is simply enlightenment, that Satan is a Christian myth, that death is a meaningless departure of the immortal spirit from the body. The Bible is simply one of many religious books. So all of these cults have many common eras, and as you study the text, you will learn more about them.